7 days. That's all it took. 7 days after my son helped me home from the hospital. He asked me to hand over everything I'd spent 40 years building. Not because I was dying, not because I couldn't make my own decisions, but because he believed I was finally too weak to say no. He looked at me with the same smile I used to trust when he was a little boy. I never imagined that one day, that same smile would hide the biggest betrayal of my life. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 65 years old. For almost 4 decades I owned Parker Industrial Supply, a small manufacturing company my late husband and I started in our garage with one machine and a borrowed pickup truck. It wasn't a billion-dollar corporation, but it gave honest people honest jobs. By the time my husband passed away, we employed over 100 families. Every paycheck carried his dream, every contract carried his name, and every brick of our home was paid for by years of sacrifice. I always believed one day my son Ryan would proudly continue what his father and I had built. Instead, he was waiting for the moment I became vulnerable enough to take it. A week earlier, I had undergone heart surgery. The doctors insisted I spend several weeks resting. Ryan seemed unusually caring. He drove me home himself, cooked dinner, asked how I felt every morning. He even brought me fresh flowers. For the first time in years, I thought maybe losing his father had finally matured him. I wanted to believe that. I truly did. On the 7th morning, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea when Ryan walked in wearing an expensive suit. Behind him was his girlfriend, Chloe. She carried a leather folder against her chest. I smiled. "Big meeting today?" Ryan smiled back. "You could say that." Something about his voice felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced every word before walking into my kitchen. Chloe placed the folder carefully on the dining table. I looked at it. "What is this?" Ryan pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Mom, I've been thinking about your future. My future. Funny how people always start with those words when they're really thinking about theirs. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to relax." I agree. So, he slowly opened the folder. "It's probably time you transferred the company to me." I stared at him. The room suddenly felt much quieter. "I beg your pardon? The business. And the house. It'll make things easier." "For who?" He hesitated. "For everyone." I leaned back in my chair. "I've only been home for 7 days. I know. The doctor said I need months to recover. I know." "So why are we discussing this now?" Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Chloe, then he sighed dramatically. "Mom, we don't know what could happen. You almost died." Chloe reached across the table. "We're only trying to protect everything you've built." "Protect it? By taking it?" Ryan slid several documents toward me. "If something happens unexpectedly, the company could become a mess. Employees could lose their jobs. The house could end up tied in probate. I've already spoken with an attorney. You'd still live here. You'd still be CEO if you wanted. We're just asking for the ownership." Ownership, such a simple word. Until someone asks you to give away your life's work. I picked up the first document, the company transfer agreement. The second, property ownership paperwork. The third, a financial authorization. Everything had already been prepared. Nobody creates documents like these overnight. They'd been planning this, long before my surgery. I looked at Ryan. "When exactly did you prepare all this?" His confidence slipped for just a second. "A few weeks ago." "A few weeks?" "So before my operation?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence answered for him. Then Chloe smiled, a polite smile, the kind that hides impatience. "Evelyn, you always said family comes first, and Ryan is your only child. Isn't this what every parent eventually does?" I looked directly into her eyes. "I also taught my son that love isn't measured by what you inherit." Her smile disappeared. Ryan pushed the folder closer. "You don't need to read everything. I've already had professionals review it. Just sign, as though 40 years of sweat, thousands of sleepless nights, my husband's legacy, could all disappear with one signature." I quietly closed the folder. "No." Ryan blinked. "What?" I said no. His face hardened immediately. "Mom, you're being emotional." "No, I'm being careful." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Ryan stood up so quickly that his chair scraped across the floor. "You don't trust me." I looked at my son, the little boy I'd carried on my shoulders, the teenager I'd defended when nobody else would, the man I'd always believed would protect me when I grew old. "I trusted you enough to build this future. But today, you're asking me to give it away before I've even recovered." Ryan grabbed the folder. You know what? Forget it. We'll talk when you've had time to think. He stormed toward the front door. Chloe followed without saying another word. But before leaving, she turned around. For just a second, she looked at the family photographs hanging on my wall. Then she whispered quietly enough that she thought I wouldn't hear. It would have been so much easier if she'd just signed. The front door closed. Silence filled the house. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone inside my company's accounting department. Mrs. Parker, I think you should come to the office. Something doesn't feel right. My heart skipped a beat. Ryan hadn't waited for my signature. He'd already started making moves inside the company, and deep down, I knew the papers on my kitchen table were only the beginning. I didn't wait until the next morning. Within an hour, I was sitting in the back seat of a taxi on my way to Parker Industrial Supply. My doctor had told me to avoid stress. Unfortunately, stress had already found me. As the company building came into view, memories flooded my mind. I remembered painting the first office walls with my husband. I remembered bringing Ryan to work when he was only 8 years old. He used to run through the warehouse pretending he was the boss. Back then, he'd proudly tell everyone, "One day, I'm going to run this company just like my mom." I believed him. I just never imagined he'd try to take it before I was ready to let go. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "Mrs. Parker, what are you doing here?" "I heard you were still recovering." I smiled. "I am. But someone said there was a problem." Her smile faded. "There is." She glanced toward the executive offices. "You should probably speak with Linda." Linda had been my chief financial officer for almost 20 years. If there was anyone I trusted with the company's finances, it was her. Linda closed her office door the moment I walked in. Her expression told me everything. "Evelyn, I didn't want to bother you while you were recovering, but I couldn't stay quiet anymore." She handed me a folder. Inside were copies of several internal emails. Every single one had been sent by Ryan. One subject line immediately caught my eye. "Executive Transition Plan." I frowned. "I never approved this." Linda nodded. "I know." I opened the first email. "Effective immediately, all department heads should begin directing major operational decisions through Ryan Parker while Mrs. Parker focuses on her recovery." Another email followed. "Please prepare updated organizational charts reflecting future leadership changes." Another. "Delay major expenditures until ownership restructuring is complete." Ownership restructuring? I had never authorized anything. I slowly looked up. "Did anyone question him?" Linda sighed. "Some people did. And he told everyone you had already decided to step down." A lump formed in my throat. He used my illness to make people believe I was retiring. Just then there was a knock at the door. "Come in." It was Carlos, the production manager. He'd worked beside my husband since the company's earliest days. He looked relieved to see me. "Mrs. Parker." I knew something wasn't right. "What happened?" Carlos hesitated. "Ryan has been bringing consultants into the building." "What kind of consultants?" "They've been inspecting equipment, taking inventory, asking what parts of the business could be sold." Sold? I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't about running the company, it was about breaking it apart. Carlos reached into his pocket and handed me a business card. It belonged to an investment group specializing in corporate acquisitions. "I found this in the conference room after one of their meetings." I stared at the card. Ryan hadn't even become the owner, and he was already discussing the company's future with outsiders. For several moments, no one spoke. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding. "Did Ryan ever say why he was in such a hurry?" Linda and Carlos exchanged a nervous glance. Linda answered quietly. "He said that waiting for you to recover would only complicate things." Those words cut deeper than I expected. Not because they were cruel, because they confirmed exactly what I'd feared. To my own son, my recovery had become an inconvenience. I stood and walked slowly toward the large office window overlooking the factory floor. Dozens of employees were working below. Some had been with us for 30 years. Others were young parents raising families on the salaries this company provided. They weren't just employees. They were part of our story. My husband used to say, "A company isn't made of steel and machines, it's made of people." Ryan had forgotten that, or perhaps he had never truly understood it. Before I could say another word, my assistant rushed into the office. "Mrs. Parker, Ryan's here." I turned toward the hallway. Ryan walked confidently into the office, surprised to find me standing there. "Mom, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same question." His smile faded. "I was just helping." "Helping? By telling my employees I'd stepped down?" He looked around the room, then lowered his voice. "I didn't want everyone worrying." "So you decided to tell them a story that wasn't true?" "It wasn't a story. It was the future." The room fell silent. Ryan folded his arms. "You know you're not going to run this company forever." "I know. So why wait? Because it's my decision, his jaw tightened. You don't trust me, I answered calmly. Trust isn't inherited. It's earned. For the first time, frustration turned into anger. I've spent years preparing for this. I looked directly into his eyes. Preparing. Or expecting. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked away. That silence spoke louder than any excuse. Linda quietly slid another document across my desk. Evelyn, I think you should see this. It was a draft announcement prepared for employees. The headline read, Parker Industrial Supply welcomes its new president. The name beneath it wasn't mine. It wasn't even approved. But it had already been written. Ryan Parker, he had planned every step, long before asking me to sign anything. I closed the folder and took a slow breath. Then I looked at everyone in the room. I have an announcement. Every eye turned toward me. As of today, no changes to this company's ownership or leadership will happen without my written approval. Linda smiled. Carlos nodded with relief. Ryan's expression froze. He realized for the first time that the company he thought he was about to control was no longer slipping quietly into his hands. And as he stood there speechless, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my attorney. Evelyn, I've completed the review. There's something in your late husband's estate file you need to see immediately. I stared at the screen. Whatever was inside that file, I had a feeling it was about to change everything. I drove straight from the office to my attorney's building. My heart was still racing from everything that had happened. Ryan had already begun acting like the company's president. He had spoken to employees, prepared announcements, even discussed the company's future without my knowledge. But somehow, my attorney sounded even more concerned. When I walked into his office, he didn't waste a single second. Evelyn, he said, there's something your husband arranged years ago that you need to remember. He placed a thick envelope on the desk. Across the front, in my husband's handwriting, were the words, to be opened only if Evelyn's ownership is ever challenged. My hands began to shake. Robert had written that nearly 12 years earlier. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means someone is trying to convince you to give away what we spent our lives building. Promise me one thing. Never mistake pressure for love. Anyone who truly loves you will never rush you into giving away your home, your company, or your independence. By the time I reached the end of the letter, I couldn't hold back my tears. Even after all these years, Robert was still protecting me. My attorney quietly slid another folder across the table. There is something else. Years ago, Robert and I had created a succession plan, one I had completely forgotten. The company could only be transferred if I personally approved it after a full legal review and confirmed that the next owner was prepared to lead it responsibly. No one could simply demand it. No one could pressure me into signing it away. Robert had insisted on that clause. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now, I realized he had simply been wise. The following Friday, I asked Ryan to meet me at the company. He arrived wearing another expensive suit. This time, he walked in confidently, certain I had finally changed my mind. Chloe followed close behind, smiling as though the celebration had already begun. Mom, Ryan said, I'm glad you called. I knew you'd realize this was the right decision. I smiled politely. I did realize something. His smile grew wider. He thought he'd won. The executive conference room slowly filled. Linda, Carlos, department managers, our attorney, a representative from the company's board. Everyone took their seats. Ryan looked confused. What's going on? I stood at the front of the room. For 40 years, this company has supported hundreds of families. It was never built for one person's ambition. It was built through sacrifice. I looked directly at Ryan. And sacrifice deserves respect. The attorney stood beside me. Mrs. Parker has made her decision regarding the future of Parker Industrial Supply. Ryan straightened his tie. Chloe squeezed his hand. The attorney continued. Mrs. Parker will remain chairwoman and chief executive officer until she chooses to retire. Ryan's smile faded. And when that day comes, the next CEO will be selected through the succession plan established by the company's governance policies. Ryan frowned. What does that mean? It means no position is inherited automatically. Every candidate, including family members, must demonstrate the experience, integrity, and leadership required for the role. The room fell silent. Ryan stared at me. So, you're choosing strangers over your own son? I shook my head. No. I'm choosing the company your father built. If one day you earn this responsibility, I'll be proud to support you. but I'm not going to hand it to you simply because you're my son." For the first time, the anger disappeared from Ryan's face. In its place was disappointment. Not because he had lost the company, because he finally understood why. "I thought you didn't believe in me," he said quietly. I walked over and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "I believe people can grow. But leadership isn't proven by asking for power. It's proven by earning trust." No one spoke. Finally, Ryan lowered his eyes. "I've been listening to Chloe. I thought if I took over quickly, I'd finally prove I was successful." I nodded. "I know, but success built on pressure never lasts." Chloe stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Ryan deserves everything." She stormed out of the room without another word. Ryan watched her leave. For the first time, he didn't follow. Several weeks later, Ryan came to my house alone. No suit, no paperwork, no folder, just a small cardboard box. Inside were old family photographs he'd found while cleaning his garage. "I should have brought these back a long time ago." We sat together on the porch, the same porch where Robert and I had planned our future decades earlier. Ryan looked at one of the photographs. "Dad always believed I'd earn my place." He did. "And so do I." He looked at me. "Will you ever trust me again?" I smiled gently. "Trust isn't rebuilt in one conversation. It's rebuilt one choice at a time." He nodded. "I understand." For the first time in a very long while, I believed he truly did. A year later, Parker Industrial Supply celebrated its 40th anniversary. Instead of announcing my retirement, I announced something much more important: a leadership development program for young managers inside the company, including Ryan. Not because he was my son, because he had spent the past year showing up early, learning every department, accepting criticism, and earning the respect of the people around him. He hadn't inherited a title, he had started earning one. And that made me prouder than any signature ever could. People often ask whether I ever plan to give Ryan the company. The answer has always been yes, just not the way he expected. A legacy isn't something you demand. It isn't something you pressure someone into signing away. A true legacy is built the same way my husband and I built our company, one honest decision at a time. And that was the greatest lesson my son and I would ever learn. The end.